Wow, when I think back to what I was worried about and thought were real problems just a couple of weeks ago, it almost makes me laugh. When I woke up a week ago one day, I felt a little sick. Nothing major, just a scratchy throat to start. I got up, gargled with salt water, as my grandma always told me to do for a sore throat, and got dressed for school. I'm in grade 8 and had a big science test that I had been studying for like crazy. Even though I wasn't feeling the greatest, there was no way I was going to miss that test. I hopped the bus like I always did and was a half hour for school. I decided to use the extra time to study a little more. I sat against my locker and crammed in every factoid I could. When my locker neighbor arrived and held out his hand to help me up, I took it and let him pull me up. Just as I was standing up, I started sneezing. I had never been a big sneezer, so it took me by surprise. I tried to turn my head and sneeze into my elbow, but not before a big wet one came out and sprayed all over Jerry's face, poor guy. He was a great sport and just wiped his face with his sleeve, laughed, and said, "Gee, thanks, that's what I get for being a gentleman." We walked to our first class together. I was feeling a little dizzy and gave my head a little shake. "Are you feeling okay?" asked Jerry. "You look a little off today." I thought about it for a minute. Yeah, I was starting to feel quite sick. I had to get through that science test, though, at the very least. That first class seemed to drag on forever. I could swear the clock was actually moving backwards. I was counting the minutes, and when the bell went, I said a silent prayer of thanks that the day was indeed moving forward. Next class was science, and after that I had decided that I would go home. I had a big drink from the water fountain, talked with friends, and did all my usual things. But as the day went on, I started to feel worse and worse. I had bad asthma and had since I was a kid. I was feeling a little like I couldn't quite catch my breath. I rocked that science test, then headed to my locker to collect some things. With how I was feeling, I figured I'd be missing school for at least a few days. I packed up my stuff, called my mom to tell her I was heading home, and stopped in at the office to talk with one of my teachers about an upcoming project. On my way out the front door, I had this weird feeling like I wouldn't be back for a long time and tried to shake it off. By the time I got home, I felt full-blown sick. I had an unreachable tickle in my throat that was driving me crazy. I got home, crawled into bed, and my mom brought me my inhaler, a snack, and some ginger ale. I passed right out and slept until the next morning. I had never been a napper, so was shocked to lie down when it was light and wake up in the dark of the next morning. I woke up feeling worse, much worse. My nose was pouring, my throat was aching, I could only take shallow breaths and was using my puffer, and I was feeling hot. My mom came to check on me, took one look at me and said, "Wow, you look awful." I stayed in bed for 2 days solid. On the third day, Jerry messaged me to say he was sick and stayed home from school too. I couldn't help but think back to that sneeze in the face and felt a little guilty. On the fourth day home, my mom brought a TV into my room and hooked it up for me so I wouldn't be so bored. As she was plugging it in, I noticed she looked really tired. I asked if she was feeling okay, and she said she felt like she was coming down with something. I was channel surfing and caught the end of some news story about a virus in China that was spreading like wildfire. It looked scary. People were walking around with masks, and it looked like the prediction was that it was going to be a big deal. It was killing older people or people with weakened immune systems. The next day, that virus, the coronavirus, was all over the news. I guess cases were popping up around the world, and it was spreading fast. One news channel was interviewing a doctor from Boston, and he was going over the common symptoms and how important it was to wash hands and stay home if you were sick. The doctor said that this was likely going to develop into a global pandemic, the likes of which we hadn't seen. He talked schools closing, all sorts of craziness. That seemed a little extreme to me, but what did I know? Within 2 days, I was starting to feel better. But by then, that virus had become front-page news. It was everywhere. Whole countries were having to shut their borders and isolate. Everyone was being advised to social distance themselves, to slow down the spread, and help protect those that were really in danger of complications, the elderly and people with health conditions. My mom was looking terrible, and now I was wondering if we had the virus. We called a HealthLink number, and someone came to the house to test us. The person was wearing a mask and told us that this was just the beginning, and that the prediction was that this virus would have dire consequences for the economy too. It turned out that we had the virus. I had to notify the school and was told that everyone was falling sick there, including the teachers. It appeared as though I was patient 0 at the school and had gotten everybody sick. I felt awful, but it's not like I knew or did it on purpose. The school was closed down the next day, along with all the other schools in the state. This was extreme, and cities and towns were declaring states of emergency. I had never even heard of schools shutting down before, let alone everything else. First, it was the recreation centers and indoor parks. Then it was pretty much anything that wasn't considered a non-essential service. The word on the street was that schools would likely be shut for the rest of the year. The whole city was shutting down. Offices were being closed, leaving a ton of people without income. Some people were still being paid or were able to keep working from home, but many were left in a very bad position. I kept thinking of everyone in the school and how I had infected them. I thought of everything I had touched that fateful morning, everyone I had spoken to, sneezing all over the school, and how I had assumed it was a run-of-the-mill cold. My mom was sick, really sick. The tables had turned, and I was now looking after her. We looked after each other and wondered how long this was going to go on for. Every morning, we would come down to the kitchen and sit around the table. We would click on the radio and listen to the updates. Every day, it seemed the numbers of confirmed cases were doubling. And what was really shocking was how fast and far it was spreading. It sounded like most initial cases in a country or city were travel-related. But then once it changed to include people who had come in contact with someone who had it, there seemed to be no stopping it. Schools were rolling out platforms for homeschooling. I thought at the very least we'd get out of schoolwork. The day Jerry texted me to tell me that one of the older teachers at school had died, I nearly dropped my phone in shock. I knew it wasn't my fault, but I couldn't help but feel guilty. After all, I was the person who brought it into the school. I wondered where I picked it up, but told myself it didn't matter now anyways. We were all told to stay inside and isolate ourselves as much as possible. I've never been so bored in my life. We binge-watched TV, read books, played board games, organized the house. I even painted a wall in my room out of sheer desperation. No one had any idea how long we would have to continue like this. But the general consensus was that it would be months, not weeks, and even then, there would still be a risk to being out and about. At least a lot of websites were offering free streaming of shows, performances. Educational websites were offering free subscriptions to help parents with homeschooling. The scary thing was that people had started hoarding supplies. Groceries, toilet paper, medications had been stripped from the shelves. A friend of my mom's had brought supplies over for us just before things got bad, and she had sent us pics of the shelves. It was a shock. I only hoped things wouldn't get worse before they got better. It was starting to feel like we were all locked inside some weird, bleak, futuristic movie. To watch more animated story videos like this, hit that subscribe button. And tell us in the comments section what you thought about this story.